Hey everyone, welcome back. Ever just, zone out and picture a world without that awful rush hour traffic? Or, okay, maybe this is just me, but a utopia where there's like infinite french fries?
Yeah.
No matter what your personal utopia looks like, get ready to go deeper with it because today we're tackling utopia, but like for real, we're diving into Fredric Jameson's Archaeologies of the Future. It's a bit of a dense read, so as always, we're here to break down the good stuff.
Yeah, because it's not all just fun thought experiments,
Yeah.
right? Like Jameson gets to this idea that utopia at its core is political.
I can see how easy it is to fall into that trap of thinking about utopia as this sort of like purely idealistic thing, no real world implications. But when you really try to picture it, you can't really separate utopia from things like who has power in this new world or how do we manage resources, all those practical questions.
Exactly. And just to give you an example, even something as, seemingly straightforward as a utopian city. Whose vision of the ideal city are we talking about? Take the City Beautiful movement, for example, back in the early 1900s. They were all about those grand boulevards and those really impressive monuments.
Sounds nice on the surface, but
Yeah, it was completely bound up in a very particular ideology. They were trying to, in essence, recreate this European style of grandeur. And often, that came at the expense of marginalized communities who were pushed out to make room for these projects.
so it's more than just like pretty buildings. It's about grappling with whose vision of the future actually gets to shape reality, right?
Absolutely. And Jameson uses this really interesting example of the Cold War. You had both the U.S. and the Soviet Union both pushing their own versions of utopia, each side saying, nope, we've got the ticket to a brighter future. It just shows you how deeply connected utopian ideas are with politics, with ideology.
And speaking of connections, Jameson also makes this fascinating link between utopia and, get this, science fiction.
Yeah, he sees utopia as this sort of subgenre of science fiction. It takes that focus on creating these like alternative societies. So it's not just about cool gadgets or spaceships. It's about using those as a way to explore what a different, hopefully better kind of society could look like.
Okay, so I'm thinking of Star Trek right now. One of my favorite episodes is The Measure of a Man. It digs into the ethics of AI and like, what does it even mean to be a person?
Perfect example. Because it's not just some space adventure, right? It grapples with these big, meaty social and philosophical questions. What makes us human? How do we treat those who are different? That right there is that utopian impulse pushing us to think critically, to really examine ourselves and the kind of future we're moving towards.
So we've got utopia as political, utopia as sci-fi. But then there's this other layer too. Jameson argues that this desire for utopia, it's fueled by hope, sure, but also a healthy dose of fear.
Right. We want things to be better, but then there's that part of us that's also a little afraid of what that better might actually cost.
It's like when you imagine finally quitting that soul-sucking job to follow your passion, It's exciting, full of possibilities, but then there's that voice like, but what if it doesn't work out?
Exactly. The push and pull of utopia, the excitement of the unknown, but also that fear of leaving behind what's familiar. Even if it's not perfect, it's what we know. And that's why, a lot of these utopian stories, they explore those challenges, even the dangers of trying to build a perfect world.
It's that classic what if, right? Like, can we really create something better without risking making things worse? Jameson digs into these questions through a few big themes, and one that I thought was super interesting was this whole idea of the city as a utopian canvas.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, cities have always been these centers for new ideas, social movements, that mix of like hope and anxiety about where we're headed. It's like they hold both the problems and the potential solutions all in one place.
And it's not just about like designing these futuristic cities, right? Jameson even talks about specific types of buildings as embodying these utopian ideals. He mentions libraries and, well, as a bit of a book nerd myself, I totally get that feeling of being surrounded by like all of human knowledge. It's amazing.
It really is. It's like stepping into a shared memory,
Yeah.
like a testament to human thought and creativity across time. And the fact that it's accessible to everyone, that anyone can come in and learn and grow regardless of who they are or where they come from, that's powerful. It's like this idea that knowledge can level the playing field.
Totally. Okay, but get this. Jameson goes beyond actual physical spaces, too. He says utopia kind of messes with our whole perception of time.
Oh, yeah. That's one of the trippiest things about his work. He argues that to really think utopianly, you have to shift away from that linear idea of time, past, present, future, and embrace something more fluid, something cyclical.
Okay, that sounds a little out there. Like, how does he even illustrate that?
He uses reincarnation as an example,
Yeah.
not in like a religious sense, but more as a thought experiment.
Yeah.
Imagine carrying all the memories of your past lives into each new existence. So you're not just experiencing your own little timeline, but the vastness of historical time itself. You'd understand events in this much broader context.
Wow. It'd be like having a built-in time machine in your brain. That would definitely change your perspective.
Speaking of the future, we can't really talk about utopia without talking about technology, right? No way. It's such a double-edged sword. I mean, think about it. Technology can be this amazing tool for progress, for connecting us, for improving our lives. But, of course, it can also be used for all the wrong reasons, for control, for surveillance, for widening the gap between those who have and those who don't.
It's like that saying, a hammer can build a house or it can, break it down. It's all about how we use it. Jameson actually uses this phrase, immaterial labor, to describe work in a world increasingly dominated by tech.
Yeah, and you know what's crazy? He was writing this back in the late 20th century, but it's even more relevant today. Think about how much of our work now is all about information, about data, about navigating these digital spaces. It's this invisible form of labor, intangible, but it's the backbone of our entire economy.
And it brings up all these questions, like who controls that data? Who's profiting from it? How do we make sure everyone benefits from technological advancements and not just a select few?
Exactly. And those are the tough questions Jameson wants us to be asking. Utopia isn't about these simple, easy answers. It's about understanding how technology, power, and social structures, how all those things are intertwined.
So no more rainbows and self-driving cars then. Jameson's making it clear that aiming for this better future, it's not going to be simple. There are inherent tensions.
Oh, for sure. He gets into a few key contradictions, and one of the most fascinating, I think, is this tension between individual freedom and what's best for the collective good.
It's one of those debates that's been going on forever, right? Like, as a society, where's that line between individual freedom and, what's best for everyone? And if we're talking utopia, how does that even work?
Right. And Jameson uses this really interesting example to illustrate that whole tension. Food, specifically communal dining.
Okay, wouldn't have thought of that one. How does that even connect?
Well, think about it. In a lot of utopian visions, communal dining, it's presented as this way to strengthen those social bonds. It ensures everyone's got access to good, healthy food. It's like a rejection of that individualistic way of consuming, a move towards shared resources.
Yeah, but on the other hand, everyone's got their own tastes, right? Their own dietary needs, even just that desire to eat alone with a good book sometimes.
Exactly. So then the question becomes, how much choice are people willing to give up in the name of, the greater good? It's one of those questions that doesn't have an easy answer, but it shows that constant push and pull between what we want as individuals and those responsibilities we have to each other, which honestly, any vision of utopia has to grapple with.
It makes you realize that even in a so-called perfect world, things wouldn't be that simple. There'd still be these inherent tensions. Another one Jameson brings up is this idea of closure, how that can be both appealing and dangerous when you're talking about utopia.
It's that idea that to really achieve utopia, you kind of need a certain separation from the outside, like a way to create these alternative social structures. The problem is, history's shown us, time and time again, that kind of isolation can lead to problems of its own. It can breed this us versus them mentality, stagnation even, like a slide into authoritarianism in the name of preserving that utopia.
It's like those intentional communities that try to create their own little utopia, often with really good intentions. But those strict rules, that separation, it can create a whole other set of issues.
It's a cautionary tale for sure. It shows how important it is to find that balance. Like, how do you hold on to the ideals of a utopian community while staying open to new ideas, to critique, to the fact that people are different? It's not about shutting everything else out.
So if we're trying to wrap our heads around Jameson's take on utopia, what's the main takeaway here? What should we be thinking about?
For me, it boils down to this. Utopia isn't some fixed destination. It's not this blueprint for a perfect world we just have to find and implement. It's more like, it's a process, It's about constantly asking questions, experimenting, always striving for something better. And part of that is acknowledging that there are always going to be trade-offs, unintended consequences. We have to be willing to face those too.
So it's the journey, not the destination.
Exactly. It's about recognizing those little utopian impulses that are already happening all around us in social movements, technological innovations, art that challenges the way things are. It's about asking ourselves, okay, What kind of future do we want? And how can we get a little bit closer, even in small ways, within all the complexities of the world as it is right now?
Which brings us to Jameson's final kind of mind-blowing question. What's the role of art in a utopia? Like, if we actually manage to create this world where everyone's needs are met, there's no more social injustice, would we even need art anymore?
Oh, right. It makes you think. Does art only come from this place of lack, of striving? Or does it speak to some deeper human need? The need to express ourselves, to connect, to find meaning, even in a world without suffering?
Yeah. Would it be purely about celebration then, about exploration? Or would it still be this form of critique, of pushing boundaries, even in a utopia?
Maybe. Or maybe, just maybe, it evolves into something we can't even imagine right now. Driven by needs and desires that go beyond anything we currently understand. It's a question Jameson leaves us with, and honestly, I think it's a good one.
It makes you really think about the nature of art, about utopia, even about what it means to be human. And on that note, I think we're going to wrap things up for today. So as you're going about your day, maybe try looking for those little utopian sparks in your own life, in your community, even in your own creative endeavors. Keep dreaming those impossible dreams, keep asking the tough questions, and keep working towards a future that's just a little bit brighter, a little bit bolder, and yeah, maybe even a little bit more utopian. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.